Dr. Deborah Birx, she hasn't really been out in the public lately. And if you're wondering where she's been or whether or not she still has good relationships with Donald Trump, just know that much like Dr. Anthony Fauci, she's become increasingly frustrated with Trump, increasingly frustrated with the influence of Scott Atlas in the coronavirus task force, and has decided to essentially travel the country in an effort to educate state and local lawmakers and universities about the pandemic to, I guess, counteract some of the negative impacts coming from the Trump administration. But with that said, over the weekend, Scott Atlas, who is in no way a public health expert, but unfortunately has become a coronavirus advisor to Donald Trump, had tweeted some misinformation about mask wearing, and Twitter took it down. So Atlas wrote in a tweet posted Saturday, "Masks work? No," followed by a series of misrepresentations about the science behind the effectiveness of masks in combating the pandemic. Now, apparently Dr. Burks was relieved that Twitter took that tweet down. Burks also told friends, fighting the virus is hard enough without Atlas. She also suggested that the task force is frustrated by Atlas's ability to find obscure information, label it as data, and present it to the president as scientific evidence, an almost insurmountable challenge. If he likes the sound of it, meaning Donald Trump, he believes it, Burks said of Trump. And Burks has clearly had it with Donald Trump. In fact, Olivia Troy, who was a former coronavirus task force advisor who worked with Burks and is now a Trump critic, said White House officials grew irritated by Birx's detailed and data-heavy presentations in the early summer that showed emerging hotspots and difficulties getting the virus under control. Some officials rolled their eyes at Birx as she delivered a message that clashed with the administration's preferred narrative that things were improving. Though she retains the title of coordinator of the White House coronavirus response, Birx has not attended any of President Trump's press briefings. I'm sure many of you have noticed that on the pandemic since he started them anew in late July, nor has she been at recent events touting the administration's advances in testing. So again, she has really been traveling the country in an effort to educate, anyone who has any influence on this pandemic in an effort to counteract some of Trump's disastrous rhetoric related to the pandemic, Cenk.
Yes, so there's a number of problems here. Number one, having her do the college circuit is basically banishing her to Siberia. She might have as much influence as Ben Shapiro on that college circuit, which is to say almost none at all. In fact, the Shapiros of the world might have more influence because their opinions get filtered up through the right-wing noise machine, and hers clearly do not. Look, the problem with going and talking to state governments and students basically one at a time is you're never gonna reach enough people in enough time. You need the media multiplier effect where everyone is talking about what you're saying. You can get that on television through those press briefings where everybody got to find out what was going on with coronavirus. Obviously, there was that legendary moment where Trump suggested injecting bleach into yourself to cure coronavirus and looked at Dr. Burks for approval, and Dr. Burks did not really give that approval. She had that consternation on her face that's now become famous and seemed mortified by the suggestion. Well, that appears to be when she started to lose influence. How dare you suggest that we shouldn't inject bleach into ourselves because it might work on table surfaces? I mean, that is how dumb the president is. And so obviously it's hard not to get frustrated by that. For her sake, she probably honestly on a personal level does not mind being banished, because otherwise you have to be in the White House and deal with the maelstrom that is Donald Trump and his insanity on a day-to-day basis. And it's impossible to do science and Trump at the same time. So you can't serve those two masters at once. And in fact, when talking about what needs to be done to protect the American people, there's of course a whole range of options: testing, contact tracing, masks, PPE, and of course vaccine at the end. And apparently the experts, a senior administration official told the Washington Post that they've decided other than waiting around for a vaccine, everything else is too hard. Let me give you the exact quote. They've, quote, this is from a senior administration official, someone inside the White House. They've given up on everything else. It's too hard of a slog. Oh, I'm sorry, were we inconveniencing you? Was it kind of problematic to try to help save American lives? Yeah, take a load off. Banish your doctors to Siberia, and then only listen to kooks like Scott Atlas, and then just don't do anything other than propaganda. And that really is Trump's strategy. It is important, and that is part of the reason why we lead the world in deaths, which now are in the ballpark of 220,000 dead Americans.
Yeah, you're right, Cenk. And if you look at countries that certainly did take the pandemic seriously from the beginning, their economies are starting to recover. So look, to be fair, it's mostly just China. And China did take a much more authoritarian approach in combating the virus, but their economy has opened back up. Businesses have opened back up. Consumer spending has increased. I'm sure it helps them quite a bit. That we rely on them for masks and other medical supplies. Unfortunately, we've outsourced all of those jobs and the manufacturing of those types of products, and so that's helped their economy as well. But my point in bringing that up is, if the Trump administration had taken the virus seriously from the beginning, if Trump refused to politicize it and refused to politicize mask wearing, we would be in a far better position today. And instead, as you mentioned, Trump has taken the path of essentially publicly scrutinizing the very public health experts that we need to rely on for accurate information. People like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who now is publicly feuding with Donald Trump, not because he wants to, but because things have gotten so bad and so tense in his relationship with Donald Trump. Trump took one of his comments out of context and used it in a campaign ad, and Fauci was furious about it because it appeared as though Fauci was lauding Donald Trump's response to coronavirus when that is not the case. During a recent interview with 60 Minutes, Fauci also shed some light on his thoughts regarding Donald Trump contracting the virus. Let's take a listen.
Were you surprised that President Trump got sick?
Absolutely not. I was worried that he was going to get sick when I saw him in a completely precarious situation of crowded, no separation between people, and almost nobody wearing a mask. When I saw that on TV, I said, oh my goodness, nothing good can come out of that. That's gotta be a problem. And then sure enough, it turned out to be a super spreader event.
Dr. Fauci also said it doesn't make any sense at all why President Trump equates wearing a mask with weakness. His very stark comments come as a serious concern grows over a very disturbing rise in coronavirus cases across the country. Just take a look at this map. Only 2 states in the US are not reporting spikes. Those states, Missouri and Vermont. Yesterday alone, the US reported more than 57,000 new infections. Worldwide, total cases are approaching 40 million.
Fauci also mentioned that Donald Trump is controlling what type of media appearances he can make, which is also disastrous because at this point, Dr. Anthony Fauci is really the only public health expert who's spreading accurate information to the American people. And in response to Fauci's efforts, of course, Donald Trump decided to say some pretty terrible things about Fauci in a call with his staffers. So Caitlin Collins from CNN reported that Trump said Fauci is a disaster. If I listened to him, we'd have 500,000 deaths, before later saying it would be 700,000 or 800,000. And then he said, if there's a reporter on you, you can have it just the way I said it. I couldn't care less. So CNN was given access to that call by a source. He apparently knew that and was proud of the statements that he had for Anthony Fauci.
Yeah, gee, I wonder who is more likely to be right, Donald Trump or doctors and scientists. Okay, if you think that's a tough call, you're not paying attention or are not very bright. So let me do 2 more things here. First of all, why is he listening to Scott Atlas, who is not an infectious disease expert? He, as Burks said and Anna read to you in the beginning, if he likes the sound of it, he believes it. How do you like that for a president of the United States in the middle of a pandemic? Well, it doesn't have to be true. He just has to like the sound of it. Mark Lipsitch, director of Center for Communicable Disease Dynamics at Harvard, said, in other words, if your goal is to do nothing, then you create a situation in which it looks okay to do nothing, and you find some experts to make it complicated. In other words, the point of Scott Atlas is to manufacture doubt. This is a strategy that was first implemented by the tobacco companies, later picked up by the oil companies on the issue of climate change. You don't have to be right, you just have to manufacture doubt. So you bring in Scott Atlas, who has no expertise in this, and call him an expert, and then he manufactures doubt for you on masks, on testing, on contact tracing, on anything that would actually save American lives. Why? Well, look, part of it is Trump wants the market to rebound, and he's too unintelligent to realize that the best way for it to rebound is for us to get past coronavirus rather than going right into the thick of the disease and the storm. That only makes the markets worse. He's just too dumb to understand that. He's just trying to do propaganda and marketing to get past it, because honestly, the only thing that's ever worked in his life, in his entire career, is propaganda and marketing. But you can't do that with a disease. And the second reason is because of this inexplicable thing that Fauci talked about, where he thinks it's unmanly to wear a mask. Why? Deep insecurities about his manhood. And again, lack of intelligence. Here, last couple of quotes here from Trump that tie that in perfectly. When talking about Scott Atlas, he said, first, in response to Savannah Guthrie at the town hall, Trump said, "I've heard many different stories on masks." Yeah, the one from all of the doctors and scientists and one from kook Scott Atlas, and he chose to believe the kook instead of all of the rest of the doctors and scientists in this country. To be fair, there's also the demon semen doctor, the Haitian lady that came out, etc. And he thinks maybe there's demon sperm, and Scott Atlas might be more right than 99.9% of doctors and scientists. Then in his rally, Trump said, quote, "Scott Adkins, if you look at Scott, Dr. Scott, he's great guy from Stanford, he will tell you." It's Scott Atlas.
No, it's amazing.
Not Adkins. He's the only guy you're listening to as an expert. You don't even know his name. You don't know it well enough to say it at a rally, but you say it anyway. And then he follows it up with, Guthrie says he's not an infectious disease expert. And Trump says, "Oh, I don't know. Look, he's an expert. He's one of the experts of the world." Oh, I see, he's an expert of the world. And so let's listen to him rather than infectious disease experts. It's hard to be this dumb, but he's gonna top it off. And I gotta give you one last Trump quote on this. He said at a rally Tuesday night in Pennsylvania, "The vaccines are coming soon, the therapeutics, and frankly, the cure. All I know is I took something, whatever the hell it was, I felt good very quickly. I felt like Superman." You idiot, you're the president of the United States and you had coronavirus, something that has killed 220,000 Americans. You should know what the hell it was. He goes out there to rally, "I don't know what the hell I took. Okay, what am I supposed to do? Educate you and protect you? What am I, the president? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, I took a bunch of things and it made me feel great." You know why it made you feel great? Because one of the things you took was steroids, which artificially makes you feel great in the short term, and it actually impairs your judgment. But you had no judgment to begin with. So now we're left with a guy going, "I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I picked an expert of the world instead of an actual infectious disease expert." Who cares? You're the one dying, not me. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.